This chapter is called A Scofflaw and Her Kittens. Some years ago, a friend sent me irises. She grows rare and antique varieties and thought I'd enjoy them. They went into my yard in Durham, North Carolina. After a year, they bloomed in rich purple, delicate pink, and creamy white color. When I went through a divorce and lost the house, I didn't want to leave those lovely flowers, so I dug up several and I put them in pots. My new apartment had a rooftop patio. They did fairly well there, although there weren't many blooms. A year later, I was able to buy my own house. The irises came with me. They thrived in my garden. 5 years later, I moved again, this time to Canada. I hated to leave the flowers, but it was against the law to transport live plants across the border. Every year when I visited Durham, I'd stalk my old house, noting that the irises were still doing well. I missed them, so I did something that made me shake in my boots. I talked with the present owner and asked if I could take a few irises, thoughtfully pointing out that they needed to be thinned anyway. He said yes, and thus the shaking began, because I'd have to sneak them over the border. I'm even a little nervous writing that. Is there a statute of limitations for plant smuggling? With irises in a plastic bag and stuffed in the back of my car, I nonchalantly told the border official I didn't buy anything in the U.S. except for that bag of M&Ms sitting on the seat beside me. Here's where being a white woman with gray hair comes in real handy. He didn't notice the sweat pooling under my armpits, and simply nodded and waved me through. Not long ago, I told the Canadian who filmed some videos for me that I had done this. He laughed and said he crossed the border a lot and they always searched his van. A young guy with a van full of video equipment is always going to be suspect. He nodded sagely when I told him it'd be worse if he was black. When I got home, I was afraid to plant them in the yard. With winter temps below freezing for days in a row, I didn't think those delicate flowers would make it. So I planted them in pots, bringing them inside during the coldest months. Their leaves never got very green, and the plants grew very little. One tiny, pale pink flower emerged the next year, but that was it. There was a sunny spot in our backyard where my elderly cat liked to lay. When I had her put to sleep, I thought that was the perfect spot to put her ashes. I added the ashes of 2 other cats I'd carried around for several years. They needed something beautiful in that spot, so I decided to take a chance and put the irises there. I'd seen neighbors with irises in their yard, so maybe they'd do okay with the harsh weather after all. I carefully watered them, but there were no blooms that year. The next year, in late May, I left on my annual trip to North Carolina. 1 week after that, I got an email and a photo from my wife. "Look at this," she wrote, and under her note was a photo of that spot with a burst of pale pink flowers. I'd lost touch with the friend who had given me the irises years before. I tracked her down on Facebook. I told her about the blooms and included the photo. "Oh," she responded, "those are called pink kittens." Despite having other colors in that original batch she'd sent, only the pink ones bloomed. Every year in early June, they bloom. It hurt my heart when we sold the house, a place I lived for 10 years. I left my cat's ashes there. The pink kittens will watch over them.